band! You hear it?
It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound track. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Sound track.
Series, and hopefully should be ending it next week with part 7. As usual, I got the same two that I've had with me the whole time, and I really have thoroughly enjoyed this series. And not to sound silly, when it's over, I'll probably be like a little upset that I won't be working with them as often anymore, because I've really had a really good time just like hanging out with them every few weeks and talking this stuff. I think it was a great chat and very informative for everybody and the listeners. I'll let Megan introduce herself first, just in case, again, like somebody doesn't know who they are. This is your first time coming across this episode of this live. This is Megan, and Megan, let everybody know where they could find your stuff and what you're all about as well.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I am a practicing occultist, intuitive tarot reader, paranormal investigator. I do intuitive tarot readings, classes on various occult subjects. I also do tarot classes, and I can do all of my things online. If anybody is local to the Fort Smith, Arkansas area, I can see you in person for any of these services. My main page is Instagram. That's the number 7 degrees of wisdom, no numbers on the end. No dashes, slashes, any of that. You can also find me on Facebook as well. If you go to my Instagram page, I have a link tree now that'll take you to all of my channels.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much. And their stuff should be in the bottom now. If it's not now on the live, it will be definitely after we're done and when the episode drops. And Mario, let everybody know what's up with you.
Sure thing. So I have a project. It's called Symbolic Studies. All of my links, social media accounts over at symbolicstudies.com. I too am a tarot reader and have lessons as well. I call them study sessions, and those have been really fun to do with people. People come to me with all sorts of dream analysis. They want me to review their artwork or talk to them about their sun sign or something like that. And so if basically, you guys help you along the journey.
I like that, how you called it study sessions. Is that what you just called it? Yeah, I'm going to have to, when we're done with the tarot series, I'll have to go back and change the name to try to like boost it back into the algorithm. I'll put this tarot study sessions instead of like that. Study sessions.
Right.
Because that's really what I feel like it was, actually, if you think about it. I mean, we were all kind of like just saying like what we knew and kind of looking at what everybody else has got. I like that. That's really interesting. So I guess
exactly.
I guess we'll just get right into it. I think what we left off with the tower, and that one again we're going to be starting off with the Toth deck and then going into Rider Waite, and Mario will be going first because his thing is the Toth deck, and then when we get to the Rider Waite, obviously Megan will be more vocal on that, I'm sure. So here you go, Mario. You can start it off.
Right on. Thank you. So this is the 16th card of the Major Arcana. It is the Tower, and it corresponds with Mars, as you can see with the glyph in the lower right-hand side. The Hebrew letter that it corresponds with is Peh, which means mouth. And it's interesting because you see this rather large mouth down below. And really what this card represents to me is sudden but necessary changes, right? Quick, swift change. And so this generally means some sort of foundation is coming down. And it's really interesting. I've done a lot of extra research with the tower and tower-like symbols like the obelisk, right, or the standing stone. And I've learned quite a bit about them over the last couple of years. And really, the tower or the building, a lot of the symbolism goes back to, in my opinion, symbolism that relates to the world tree, actually. So you can almost imagine, the trunk of a tree as an example. And when humans are building structures that go from earth to the heavens, it's really creating a bridge between the above and the below. And so this is the story of the Tower of Babel, right? And in fact, this card has a lot to do with that story. So if you understand that storyline, I think you're going to get a lot more out of what this card represents. So just a quick review of the Tower of Babel story. This is the first civilization post-flood that came together and wanted to build a tower to the heavens. And so this is their way of trying to connect with God, if you will, or also to becoming God, right? And so this was against God's will. And so he actually brought it down. And the way he brought it down and the way he halted the production of this tower was to scramble everyone's language. So then one day, nobody understood each other at all. And so this was a collective effort in the beginning, and they had been working on this for, I believe it was many, many, many years. And at some point, God said, I'm not having any of this. And so he introduced new languages amongst everyone. And this encouraged everyone to spread around the world, actually. And so there's a lot to be said about this myth and kind of like its implications and everything else. But long story short, the tower was a means to connect the above and the below. And afterwards, things had fallen apart and people split from this central region and developed other nations and countries and rituals and customs and things like that. But it was this united sort of front. It was this united effort, right? And that's what a lot of these symbols represent. The tower, the obelisk, the standing stone, the tree or the world tree as well. They act as symbolic bridges between, again, the above and the below. And they oftentimes relate to order and they relate to structure. And so sometimes these towers were like in the middle of town or in the middle of a region. And so it was kind of considered this sacred center sort of location, for the people that were living in that same area. And so to have that kind of structure come down, obviously it can be looked at as being very devastating, or it can be looked at as a new beginning, a fresh start. So something else can be built, in the place of that tower, as an example. So it's kind of symbolically like a clean slate, I would say. Given the fact that it's a tower too, very much related to phallic symbolism, very much related to the world axis, which I always go on about. But to me, those are very much overlapping symbols in so many different ways. And the phallus too, and the patriarchal figure as an example. When he's righteous and when he's living right and he's balanced, he brings order and structure to the community. He brings order and structure to the family unit. Obviously, this can get away from him, and he can basically be a tyrant, right? So this card is very abstract. It's probably one of the more chaotic abstract cards in this whole entire deck, right? Just given the nature of everything. And there's just a ton of energy here. It's like exploding with energy, which is super appropriate given the Mars connection. So Mars obviously being related to war and violence and things like that. It makes sense that this card would have, that kind of quality to it. I think it's very interesting that you see this eye in the sky. One of the things I always like to talk about, and dude, you just did a ton of eye symbolism stuff, right? So I'm sure that sticks out to you immediately, but the eye is both projective and receptive, right? And so to me, that's one of the things I always have to bring up whenever eye symbolism comes around. I also did a presentation called Illuminati Symbolism, and I get into the all-seeing eye. I get into the eye of providence. And I personally make the case that a lot of eye symbolism that you might see in Freemasonry, as an example, I think there's something to be said about its relationship with the North Star, or Polaris. Some people have called it Polaris as well. It's symbolically this eye in the sky. And so I think that that relationship could be made here. Again, that the tower symbol, I think, is emblematic of the world axis, which goes from the North Pole to the northern sky. So there's lots of northern symbolism that you can kind of pull at if you're interested in that sort of thing. A lot of towers you'll see in the tower card, like especially in the Rider-Waite version, it's very much, you know, part of the whole entire motif. And a lot of other cards have done this too, but there's usually a crown being blasted off of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to me, when I think of the crown, obviously I think of head symbolism. Aries corresponds with the head, which is ruled by Mars. And also I think of the head, like the head of a penis as well. And there's very much like a orgasmic sort of quality to this card, arguably, right? There's a sexual potency to this card. And so to me, orgasm definitely is part of this card. Arguably too, Kundalini awakening as well could be looked at as being part of this card. And that the tower itself is kind of symbolic of your spine, right? And the serpents, the fire serpents or fire snakes that go up your spine. And funny enough, spine is an anagram for penis. So all of these things are very much related to each other, I would say. One interesting thing that we will see in other versions of this card is the fact that the figures that are falling from the tower in proportion to the tower itself are very, very large. And when you're looking into the Tower of Babel story, the humans or the people that were building the tower, they were actually giants back then. And so to me, when I see these large figures coming down from the tower, they look very, very big. And so some of them, it almost appears as though they're alluding to this gigantic sort of nature of these figures, which is also really interesting too, because the Gemini twins in Babylon were referred to as the Great Ones. And they're really, really large. There's a number of myths aligning themselves with Gemini, the Gemini twins, and their gigantic stature. And so I think that this is potentially a connection that when you see two figures falling from the tower, sometimes they look like brothers. And it makes me wonder if they're actually alluding to the Gemini twins. You know, and part of the Gemini twin symbolism is that the twins are actually from a cosmic egg, that they were born or hatched from the same egg. And so in a way, symbolically, it kind of makes sense with the tower in that they were in the same tower, this unifying sort of force, if you will, and then they are now separated from each other and also from the tower. And also, too, as Gemini relates to Mars, of all things, you know, Gemini has a lot to do with division. It has a lot to do with conflict. It has a lot to do with battle. So you're dealing with the number 2. The number 1 is unification. The number 2 is very divisive because now you actually have two things that are opposing each other. That creates some sort of strife or creates some sort of friction of some kind. So I think the case could be made. We'll see it here in the Rider-Waite version that sometimes the figures that are falling from the tower may very well be Gemini in essence, right? So that's interesting. And let me see here. Well, at least in the Thoth version, you could see a clear depiction of the Demiurge on the right-hand side, which is interesting and appropriate to talk about because we are in Leo season. And so the Demiurge has the head of a lion and the body of a serpent or a worm. And I've made videos about this, but there is a lot of overlapping symbolism between the serpent and the feline. In fact, some cultures consider them to be very closely related. And also, in addition to that, the dragon, I would say, is part of this sort of symbolic soup as well. So the feline, the serpent, and the dragon have a lot of overlapping things together. And so the demiurgic symbol, generally lion head, serpent body. He's known as being blind to other people's wants or needs or desires. He's very much symbolic of the ego. He wants all of the shine. He wants all of the glory, right? He believes that he is the supreme deity, and he believes that he rules over everything. But he's unaware of the fact that actually there's a god above him, which is his mother, Sophia. So this is Gnostic symbolism. But his destructive nature and just how powerful he is, I think it makes sense to include him in the Tower card. And then on the left-hand side, almost kind of like balancing this energy, you have this dove carrying a sprig of, it might be acacia or something like that. I'm not sure. But I do know under the like thelemic sort of banner, the dove is very much symbolic of Typhon. And so in certain ways, what I think they're actually creating here is Crowley is creating a mother and child sort of dynamic. The mother being the dove, Typhonian in nature, I would say, feminine in nature. And then this is kind of in contrast or opposite to the demiurge, who definitely has symbolism associated with him that, you know, basically implies everything, that he is like the sun. You know, he's the sun. He's the sun, the actual physical sun, S-O-N, and the also the planetary sun, S-U-N. And so I think that's what you're seeing, mother and son, mother and child, essentially, on the left-hand side and the right-hand side there. So, yeah, that's what I got for the card at the moment. What do you guys think?
I was muted, sorry. I do like how he does have the, well, like you just mentioned, the dove. I mean, that is even in the OTO Laman. So I did find that interesting. And even with the snake, his Baphomet, I mean, even the serpent and the lion, that's his Baphomet. I kind of like, I like how that's included. You're mentioning something about them, about snakes and cats. And I'm wondering if it has anything to do with, like, their spine, actually, like how you mentioned spine before. You know, or, like, even the way they attack. They both kind of come back and go. They kind of, like, pull back and then go. Oh, I memean, not to sound silly, but even like a penis. You know, it's going to grow out. And when you're done, it goes back. I mean, they all do. Even a turtle. I mean, I've questioned if the dead uses that for a reason because of the head going out and going back in. Kind of like a hermit type thing.
Have we gone over the similarities between serpent and feline before?
I don't know. You can if you like, if you don't want to now.
Just briefly, because it's really, really interesting, and we are in Leo season. So there are species of serpent and feline that have slit pupils. They both have fangs. They both hiss. As you mentioned, they both strike similarly. And then they both have tails. And it's been said that the tail of the lion or the feline is where its true power resides. And obviously the tail is very serpentine-like kind of in nature. And then esoterically, it's interesting because the strength card, which is the card that corresponds with Leo, it also corresponds with the Hebrew letter Teth, which means snake. And so this is like an esoteric thing that has existed for like a very long time, this relationship between serpent and feline.
Yeah, you said something.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you said something just now, and I totally forgot reading that comment. Damn it, I was going to say something.
Oh, you're all good. You're all good.
Yeah, about, cats.
I'll have to look into that.
The cats. One thing I thought was interesting, I don't even remember how I came across it. I might have been looking up stuff for cats just to, let me find weird, random stuff that might go along with occultism. The reason, I can't remember if it has anything to do with the tail, but I do know, like, the reason they always fall on their feet is because their equilibrium always somehow knows where one of the directions is. So, like, they always know where, and they said, we don't have that. Humans don't have that. We could be falling, and if our eyes were closed, we'd have no idea probably after a while which way's which, or whatever they were getting at. The cat always knows which way it has to turn to fall, like within its equilibrium.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I'll say too, the symbol for Leo looks, depending on the version, there's a lot of variants of the Leo glyph, but depending on the version, it looks really similar to the node symbol, the north node and south node symbol, which are just flipped, right? And in the Vedic world, the north node and south node are referred to as Rahu and Ketu. the head and tail of either the serpent or the dragon. And so there is that relationship as well. Just with the glyph and how they both relate to the feline serpentine dragon kind of thing. So it's a whole entire weave that people can pull out if they want to.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think of it like that. It really does look much like a snake. I mean,
yeah.
And then again, very good. Yeah, and I mean, you did mention, I mean, it's associated with Mars, so I totally get like all the red. I see somebody asking about what about the colors. I mean, my opinion, I mean, it's mostly red because of Mars. You know, to go on with chaos and change. One thing I thought was interesting, though, you know, it is associated, like you said, with the mouth. I do think that in itself can cause chaos and change in multiple ways. One, just from speaking. You're going to get somebody's attention. You're going to make them think something and react a different way, whatever. You're going to cause change. And just even in the environment, you're going to be sending out vibrations. I mean, you can eat something. Now you're causing change to what it used to be until you chew it up into a million little pieces. I mean, there's like so much things, actually, that can go on with your mouth to create actual change. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, there's even a Hebrew letter, shin, and it corresponds with tooth. And it has to do with exactly what you're saying, I think. The tooth's, our teeth's ability, our mouth's ability, rather, to create change and to dissolve things and to break things down. And actually, a lot of times, mouth symbolism is related to that. You're going to hear more about the mouth and how it might relate to hell, the mouth of hell, versus, say, heaven or something like that. Right. And so there's even old like medieval paintings where it's some demon with a huge mouth and it's like that's the gateway to hell, or they're eating just like tons of people and they're in the pits of hell or something like that.
Yeah, it was at that guy's concert. He had a concert that looked like that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I can't remember. On. Yeah, it was the one with all these, a bunch of people died during the concert.
You're talking about the Travis Scott concert?
Yeah, the opening, I think, of it. Looked like that picture.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah, exactly. And it was that whole show was all about taking you to the other side. Even I don't know if you remember. Yeah, but there was a huge mountain in the background. That was like part of the set design was the mountain. And I would say arguably the mountain and the tower, believe it or not, have a lot of symbolism related to each other. They're completely related to this idea, once again, of kind of bridging the gap between heaven and earth, essentially. So when you climb the mountain, you're closer to the heavens. If you get to the top of the tower, you're closer to the heavens, for sure.
But, yeah, I think, and, you know, besides, you know, you mentioned, the whole eye and the tower. I do question, like, lighthouses. You know, how it's kind of like a phallic symbol, and then it's got the light at the top. That, for some reason, it just made me think of a lighthouse, this card, too, even though it's not in there. But, no, you're talking about, like, towers and phallic symbolism and lighthouses and that eye. And
no, that's a good call. And also, too, if we're going to be kind of talking about these two, I think arguably, too, then the eye symbolically could be your pineal gland. It could be your third eye. And so it's at the top of the tower. So it's an ascended sort of point, right? So it could be symbolically at the top of your spine or at the top of your body in the third eye sort of region. So I think that point's well taken for sure. And then I was just going to say, too, regarding the mouth and kind of its lower nature, it's like at the very bottom of the card and implying this lower nature. And obviously it's breathing fire. What I do think that's interesting too is I already mentioned that the eye projects and receives, right? So that I would say simultaneously is going on here. And you'll also see this in the universe card as well. There's an eye kind of hanging out there in the universe card in the Thoth deck. And I think about the same thing, projecting and receiving information. And the mouth also projects and receives as well. So at the very top, you have our eye, which gives and takes. And then you also have the mouth down below, which also gives and takes too, which I think is kind of a curious sort of thing, I guess.
You know, when you had mentioned that before, I think that was one of the things I forgot that I wanted to mention about like the whole like mouth and the eye, like even with silence. I do think to an extent, like part of magic is like closing your eyes and your mouth, like not projecting anything out of your mouth. Your eyes aren't looking out here anymore, you know, and they do project, like you were saying. I even mentioned that in my eye series. Your eyes do actually project a little bit. People didn't know that.
Right.
So like I do think, like, in my opinion, when it comes to magic, I think you actually have to like kill off the oxygen feed to your eyes, stop the tear ducts, and actually like almost start to kill your eyes and go back in a sense, as silly as that sounds, or wild as that sounds. So like the silence and like the eye and the mouth, I for me, it makes total sense that like you kind of need to close all of them, I think, to open this one.
I see. Yeah. Very interesting.
And then I'm done, and you can go now, me.
I just, like I said before in these series, I don't know the Thoth deck really, really well like Mario does. I'm a Rider-Waite girl, but I really like I've talked about this before, like the sacred geometry that he's using, the geometric shapes. I'm fixing to go down a rabbit hole on that one. And I also love the color scheme that he's got going on here, reds, oranges, and yellows. I mean, it's like fire destroying, breathing out fire to destroy the birth canal that they're falling out of. So that's pretty much, and I love, the dove symbolism, the third eye symbolism, the demiurge as well. But I'm super into the sacred geometry that he's got on all these cards.
Right. Yeah. It looks awesome. And also too, that, just the background, the orange part that runs down the card, it's just symbolic of a lightning bolt, as well. So that destructive force that is present with the lightning bolt, and also how quickly too lightning strikes and everything else. Definitely, I think he just kind of used those lines to great effect just to kind of create this chaos. Necessary chaos, as I was saying earlier.
And one other thing I did want to add, I know it's the 16th, it says 16, but if you consider like the 0 card, technically the first card, physical card, it is the 17th card. Even though it's the 16th tarot, it's the actual 17th physical card, and sometimes I do wonder if there's like a play off of like that extra whatever. And again, just to go back to like my opinion of what 17 can represent, again, if this is associated with chaos and change, that is taking something and it's not what it used to be anymore. So the idea of that or what it used to be is dead. It is no longer, and now this exists. If I decided to switch from Newports to Marlboros, me who smokes Newports is gone, and the me who smokes Marlboros, you know what I'm saying? That is dead and cut off, technically, or no longer exists. I do think 17 is associated with death at times. And I think this is another example just to show that. Because there will be death of a way of something that used to be.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. The other thing just kind of related to 7 too, 16, if you add 1 and 6 together, it creates 7. And there's a lot to be said regarding the number 7 and its power to transmute and change things. And then I know I go on about the northern correspondence, but the 7 stars of Ursa Major Minor.
Stuff, though.
Right on, nice. Revolving around the pole star, revolving around this axis mundi, which kind of looks like a tower or a tree or an obelisk or standing stone or whatever. Yeah. The other thing that's just coming to me right now is that, and this is helpful for a lot of different reasons, I would say, but we have a herbal tarot deck, and my girlfriend Michelle, she's an herbalist, and on occasion I am looking through that deck to see what the plant correspondence is, or at least according to some people. And if I'm not mistaken, the tower relates to garlic, which to me, just I love garlic, but how potent it is, and just everything about it to me seems like it would be a really good match for the tower card here. So sometimes that's kind of interesting, is just to consider the plant or herbal sort of relationship with some of these cards, and you'll get a lot out of it.
Maybe that's why the mouth is associated with it too. Somebody eats garlic, you're definitely gonna smell that shit.
Yeah, there you
go. You were done, Megan, so we can move on to the next one? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. And now we're moving on to yours, the Rider-Waite deck. Oh, and real quick, just not to take advantage of plugging an old Occult Rejects, but if you're into hearing Mario talk more about the stars and stuff, when he was on the Occult Rejects a while ago, he talked a lot about that, and I thought it was amazing. So if you want to hear more of him doing that with us, you can go listen to an older episode. Sorry, awesome. This is all I could get. Oh, yeah, no, not a problem, man. I think that stuff is amazing what you do with the stars, because I think you're really onto something with that, dude. For real.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tower card it's one of my favorite cards. A lot of people are scared of this card and the Death card when they get it in a spread, because it's how it's been demonized in occult movies and horror movies and stuff like that. But I welcome this card. I love this card. I mean, I love moments when I have a massive upheaval and just totally change and transform myself. So it means massive upheaval. It shakes things up so that new things can occur. It tears down foundations, old belief systems, your ego. The bricks represent the force that binds our false identity. It's like a wake-up call, like a rude awakening. It can represent like downfalls or hitting rock bottom. Also, it's victory over the shadow side as well. So that's really huge, especially when you're on a spiritual journey and you're trying to go down that path and kind of conquer your shadow side as you go along. I mean, we never really stop doing that, do we? But it really helps when we make small wins like that, for sure. The lightning bolt represents the flaming sword in Kabbalah. As you're going down the tree of life path, you incarnate, and then your goal is to try to get back up. So what that represents is the flaming sword. The crown falling off represents divine intervention, and the fire that rains down. So it represents like a spontaneous shift or sudden influx of spiritual consciousness. And the people that are falling down in the card they're said to be the people that are in the devil card. So it's like a massive realization after they've unchained themselves, and then so that leads to a major breakthrough for them. So the crown also represents the dethroning of materialistic ideas and the ego. The flames there on each side, so there's 22 of them all together. It's a divine spark or seed. It represents the 22 archetypal forces. On one side, you have 10 of them that are representing the spheres on the tree. And then on the other side, there's 12, and they represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. Okay. The secret name of this card is the Lord of the Host of Mighty. Its association with fire and Mars, which is associated with Scorpio, Aries, and Pluto. The red that's in the card represents the intensity. And also another association is the House of Self. And then we have Mars, which is the god of war. So we must, have wars to be able to clear the way for the new. Keywords for this card are awakening, revelation, rebuilding on a stronger foundation than before. It's a rebirth and a spiritual awakening, and it's like rising again like a phoenix from the ashes. So if you get this in a reading, it's actually a really good omen, because that means that, you need a big spiritual shakeup to kind of get you going on your path.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. One thing I'll add regarding the yellow flames is what I think they're also alluding to. I think you're totally spot on. I'm glad you counted them too. I don't know if I ever counted them. That's a good call. But 22 of them definitely relates them to the Hebrew alphabet, which there's 22 letters. And the letter that's considered to be the spark of the alphabet is Yod or Yud, which looks exactly like those little flames. It looks like a tiny little flame. And so I believe that what you're seeing too is they're alluding to 22 little Yuds or Yods up there as well.
Huh. Interesting.
And so do you see what I'm saying? Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Do you see what I'm saying regarding the proportion of the people with the tower? This is very intentional.
Yeah. I never looked at it like that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they should be much, much, much smaller. And even the crown is really huge too. And when you look at older decks, much older than the Rider-Waite, like the Marseille deck, it does the exact same thing. These figures are massive. And so they are alluding to, for whatever reason, and there's a few different things I can kind of think of with it, but they're alluding to their gigantic nature. So in a way, I actually think they're giants. people of old, right? And so it reminds me of the Tower of Babel story, and these people were giants as well. It reminds me of the Gemini twins, which Gemini corresponds with the lovers as well. So if these are lovers and they're gigantic lovers, there's still this Gemini sort of correspondence. But the Gemini twins have been looked at as gigantic figures. They were called the Great Ones. So I think there might be something there. And because one is predominantly wearing blue and the other one has this red cape or whatever, they're implying this juxtaposition, right? This contrast between these two figures, whether they're lovers or twins or whatnot. But there's the warm color of the red, and then there's the cool color of that robe there.
I never thought of that the difference in size of the people could actually mean something. Because they definitely did not fit out those windows.
No, they don't.
I like that it's also gray as well, because gray in the occult is a combining of black and white, which is union of polarity, and this is one pole, as opposed to two. So I like that they use that color as well. Right.
The other thing I'll say too, this card got me thinking about the nature of, order coming from chaos. And so that's always seemingly the thing. It's like order out of chaos and then also chaos out of order. So what we're seeing is the chaos out of order aspect, but out of this chaos, a new order will come about. Right. And so, there's something to be said about all of that. And with the world axis symbolism, I did a presentation called Decoding Chaos. And long story short, it was believed that the world was very much chaotic in its primordial state. All of the elements existed, but there was no separation between the elements until the world axis came to be, until God, if you will, symbolically separated the earth from the heavens. That's when we had structure. That's when we actually had order. That's when the elements actually were separated enough so that they can kind of do their thing. And so God, symbolically too, is kind of a pillar as well, I would say. And there's so much to say about his relationship with the world axis and everything else. But you're seeing that structure or that order coming down, basically. But again, a new order will come from it, for sure.
One thing I wanted to add, you said something about you said there was 22 of those
Hebrew letters or flames.
Yeah. I was thinking before. Now, like this fire, obviously, and it has to do with like Mars and the fire. I was thinking how like Jupiter, even on the Tree of Life, would be like a cross from it. The sigil for that would be like an X, and then like two spheres on one side and two on the other. So like, I've even made comments before. I think that's where X22 has gotten his logo from. I do think it comes from that sigil. So like I do think you can get a 22 there, or put the two twos together and you get 4, which would be the same sphere that Jupiter falls on. But I always kind of like associate Jupiter with almost like electricity. And like if you thought of electricity getting grounded, this is exactly what you would see too. It hitting something and causing fire and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a little off there.
Jupiter absolutely corresponds with lightning, 100%. And I'm glad actually you brought up the Tree of Life, because symbolically the way I tend to interpret it would be, if you're looking at the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, the two pillars on the side are always the ones that are generally emphasized, but there's that central pillar that's taller and deeper than the other two. This tower would represent that central pillar. Yes. I would say the middle way, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I've always taken it kind of like as like the middle path.
Yeah.
Especially like when you have like both of those on the side. Like you even talking about like the twins, like you constantly have like, you have the lovers, then you have the twins. And then this you're showing like you're constantly getting that. And I do question, like, is that also showing like different times that just the pillars as well?
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. Do you want me to go on to the next one? You good, Mick?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. This is the Star.
Nice. So something that I came to the realization of, I don't know, sometime within the last couple of years, is the idea that the next 3 cards, I think it kind of makes sense to speak about them, at least just quickly, and their relationship with each other. And so when we think of, as an example, the moon card, the next card, which we're going to talk about today, nobody questions what moon we're referring to, right? When we're talking about the sun card, nobody questions what sun we're probably referring to. But yet with this card, the star card, people don't have a concrete idea of what star is actually being referred to. But I have, evidence to suggest that it's actually talking about a very specific star, and it's talking about the pole star. It's talking about Polaris, which is the star of stars, which is heavily related to the number 7. And so you'll see here that there's 7-pointed stars here, and it's not uncommon to see the star card be surrounded by 7 stars. Or also I have decks where the star itself is 7-pointed in nature. And so the star card is surrounded by 3 main constellations, but the 2 I generally talk about most of the time is Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Dippers. They each have 7 stars. You're talking about the Dippers. So you're talking about vessels. You're talking about 2 vessels. And it's fascinating that this card has 2 vessels. It has 2 cups, right, that she's pouring, which relates it also to the Temperance card as well, because the angel in the Temperance card also has 2 vessels. And what is the Temperance card doing? She's pouring from one vessel to the other. Well, it's really, really fascinating because I just recently read that the number 14 symbolically relates to the Dippers because there's 14 stars combined in the northern sky, right? And when you start studying the Dippers, a lot of fascinating things kind of come to light. And so I think a lot of occultism has to do with the northern sky and a lot of the northern symbolism I like to talk about and everything else. But when you look at the Dippers in the sky, they go around Polaris, and the way the Dippers are positioned, what it looks like through the course of the year is that the Dippers are pouring from one to the other. It's this constant dynamic of one Dipper pouring to the Big Dipper, and then once the Big Dipper gets high enough, it's pouring into the Little Dipper, and then so on and so forth. So it's this perpetual pouring between the Dippers, between these 2 vessels. So when you look at the Temperance card, that's what you're looking at, in my opinion. When you're looking at the 2 cups filling each other, you're looking at the Dippers filling each other symbolically as they rotate around this central star, the pole star. So I think the case can be made that this star is the star of stars. It's Polaris, the pole star. It's also the guiding star, right? And the Virgin Mary, sometimes she's referred to as Stella Maris, which means the star of the sea. And so this is a reference to her relationship with this exact same star, this guiding star, the star that's the most important star in sea navigation. Because if you knew where the North Star was, at the very least, you can find your orientation because you knew where north is. So you knew at least in what direction you were traveling in, right? So the North Star, to a lot of people back in the day, was the most significant star in the heavens because it is the axle of the wheel of heaven. It's the star that everything else revolves around in the heavens, except for the wandering stars. So its significance really can't be understated, in my opinion. So that's the relationship I see. Also, the Argentum Astrum, the AA, it's a reference also to this star as well. So Crowley's AA is a reference to this star, which is why their main symbol is a 7-pointed star. And it has the word Babylon written around it. It has 1 letter per tip of the 7-pointed star, spelling out Babylon. So this 7-pointed star that you see here, it's a reference to the Babylonian star, the silver star, which to me is the North Star. And there's a lot of symbolism here related to Aquarius as well, because that's the planetary, or excuse me, that's the sign that this card corresponds with, is Aquarius, who is the water bearer. And Aquarius is very interesting because it provides water for that portion of the heavens as well. And so towards the end of the zodiac, towards the end of the year, it leans watery. Everything, the signs lean towards a watery sort of nature. So you have Capricorn, which is the sea goat, right? So it's an earth sign, but there's the oceanic portion of the sea goats. And then you have Aquarius, which is an air sign, but it's the water bearer. And then you finish with Pisces, which is literally the fish or fishes. And that actually is a water sign. But there are other constellations right around Aquarius that are watery in nature. And so Aquarius is thought to provide water for that portion of the night sky. And there's symbolism related to Aquarius that suggests that either the Great Flood occurred during Aquarius season, or that the waters literally came from Aquarius itself. But this is something that's kind of been repeated multiple times, is that there's something related to the deluge and Aquarius, which I think is really interesting. The Hebrew letter is He, which is interesting too, because the 4-lettered name of God, the Tetragrammaton, has 2 He's in it. It's Yod He, or 2 He's, Yod He Vav He. So that's pretty significant. The fact that this letter is repeated twice in God's 4-lettered name. The translation for He is window. And I believe that this is a reference to the firmament, which makes sense because the alternative title, the hermetic title for this card is the daughter of the firmament, right? And let's see here. Just checking out my notes to make sure I pretty much got everything. I think I got most everything, but just wanted to say too that the North Star, it's at the top of the world tree symbolically. So when people put a star on top of a Christmas tree in their home, this is a reference to the North Star. Where does Santa come from? He comes from the North Pole, right? So this is one of the most overt sort of northern sort of symbols that we have, like in pop culture, I guess. And so this is what that star is referencing, in my opinion. Yeah, so there's a few other things that maybe I can unpack when we get to the Rider-Waite version, but that's what I have right now. What do you guys think?
For me, I do think it's funny how you mentioned Santa Claus, because I'm going to talk about this in the eye sense, because I actually used this card for the eye series. And Santa Claus does come up a lot when you start running parts of the eye too, believe it or not. I thought that very much that she was possibly like the hyaloid canal, or that's like the ora serrata area of the eye, because you will go from 2 different types of fluid as well. You will go from the aqueous to the vitreous. In my opinion, just my opinion, I could be totally batshit crazy, but I do question if that's even doing the whole water to wine that Jesus did. You're going from the aqueous, which that into the vitreous, which has blood in it. The aqueous does not. So you're actually switching 2 type of fluids in your eye as well. I can't remember. Is it what card it is? The Knight. I'm thinking he's holding the cup up and there's a crab on it in the Toth deck, Mario. Do you know which one that is? Not to put you on the spot. The guy's like holding like a cup up, and there's maybe the Magician, and it has like a crab on the top of it.
I think you're thinking of in the Thoth deck. It's Knight of Cups.
Knight of Cups, yeah. That even looks just like the optic nerve, actually. The optic nerve could, if you look at it, it looks like a crab in a sense, how it comes out like that. It almost even looks like a seat, or I've even questioned if Metallica's Ride the Lightning is based on the electric chair, which is really the optic nerve in your eye. But I do think this card right here, I mean, even the aura serrata in your eye can grow. It wouldn't be crystals so much like that. It would look more like a pearl, but it can grow crystal-like stuff on it over time in your eye as well, which I thought was kind of like what the Crystal Tower was in the Neverending Story in a sense, but because that even the whole thing around it looks like the aura serrata. But I think this is actually a lot of eyeball symbolism. I think it's showing you maybe possibly crossing from the aqueous into the vitreous, which is where you would have the hyaloid canal, which I do think she could possibly be showing. The cup upside down maybe with this is because it's like looks like it's pouring in. Maybe when the other guy's holding it and the crab's going up, coming out, maybe that's kind of going out. I don't know, but I do see kind of like maybe a play off of those 2 different cards with that cup. But that's all I got for this. Sorry, it was a little out there with the eyeball stuff. But
No, you're good. You're good. That's what you're here for. I appreciate it, man. I think it's cool.
All right.
Also, I just have to say too, two vessels, right? Very emblematic, in my opinion, of two breasts as well. And in fact, I do have one deck from a more of an esoteric sort of perspective, and it has a woman in front of or behind a 7-pointed star, and her breasts are lactating, and they're turning into the stars of the heavens.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's a really interesting deck. And so I think that there is a relationship there as well. And even when you look at the zigzag lines that make up the Aquarius glyph, I think that we basically got the shape of the letter M and the shape of the letter W from these zigzags. I think it comes back to water. It goes back to water. And so that's why water starts with a W. Mom starts with an M. There's two M's in mom, right? So matrix and womb and Mary and things like that. There's a lot of feminine words that start with W or M. And I just think it's interesting that it kind of looks like water. And so I think there's a relationship there as well.
You know, it's interesting that you even mentioned the M and the W. One, I totally agree. I sometimes even wonder if it has to do with like sine waves or whatever. But like even like the Milky Way, like Lisa's saying, stars of the Milky Way.
That's it. Exactly.
The milk of the stars. But like you even mentioned the M and the W. Not that I'm playing into the whole idea. Like I'm sure you've both have heard how like there's beliefs where man created woman. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever. I could see how M would be just a reflection of W if you had it, you know, if you were looking at water and you had those two peaks of, it would reflect as a W. So the M does create the W as a reflection in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely, for sure.
All right. What about you, Megan? I'm done.
So I really love that, you know, he uses a lot of geometry in this one, and the spirals again, you know, represent creation. So when I see this, I think like integration of the spiritual body down into the physical. And I love, you know, the blue, the watery colors, all that. This is a very intuitive and healing type of card. And it even looks like he's got some numbers painted into the geometric shape there on the bottom at her feet. I mean, I don't know if I'm seeing that right or not, but like I see a 4 and a 1.
Oh, let me see if we can zoom in.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's possible.
Oh, okay. You're talking about like over here, right?
Yeah. And those look like the platonic solids as well. I mean, like if they were stacked on top of each other as well. I'm like really looking forward to looking into this.
See, and I've even said before, I think the roses, sorry to interrupt you. Sometimes I do think the roses might have something to do with like open or closed, like showing you stuff with the pupil as well. And like once you get to the hyaloid canal, that's kind of like what controls and does read again like a cat and a snake, and it looks like an S when it does it, when the hyaloid canal bends. That's like a plunger that will actually change your pupil. And I do sometimes think that even the roses are symbolizing that in cut tarot.
Right. So this card is very beautiful. It's very hopeful. That's one of the words that people like to say with it is like there's this hope sort of quality that is emanated from it. And I definitely agree with that. There's something to be said about the dynamic of hope too, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. In Pandora's box was open, and all of these atrocities kind of spewed forth and came out from it. The last thing that was in there actually was hope. So that's something kind of worth chewing on. It's a very interesting sort of dynamic that the last thing was hope. But one of the things I was just going to say, though, is that the star card, it's just, to me, it's I like what were you saying there, Megan, about some kind of like bringing things into fruition. What did you say? Can you please repeat that? The
integration of spiritual body to the physical. And it's a very intuitive card because it's got a lot of water in it. So you can make the connection there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. For sure. And I really think, to me, the star that I'm referencing, the pole star, it kind of is very much in line with all of this. And notice that there's no other figures here, you know, or no other people or whatever. It's just her. And so I think it kind of is one of these things where you can be your own best ally as well, and you can heal yourself, right? And understanding who you are and where you come from and all of that, and kind of operate as though you are the hub of the wheel, right? Which the pole star actually is, I think is a positive thing. It can be a very positive thing. And so acknowledging your own divinity, you know, something else that kind of comes to mind with it. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say too, actually, was the fact that the urn of Aquarius, or the cup of Aquarius, holds many things. And so water is the first thing that people think of. But actually, when you really start looking into it, there's different sort of like schools of thought that allude to the fact that it's actually holding pure ether or spirit, frequency, electricity. That's another one that comes up quite a bit, actually, is that it holds electricity, just energy, just potential, right? And so the electricity thing I think is really interesting because Aquarius is opposite Leo. And so there's a lot to be said about that polarity between Leo and Aquarius. And there's a surprising amount of kind of electric, fiery stuff that you can kind of pull out from Aquarius symbolism. And then also with Leo symbolism, there's a surprising amount of watery symbolism that's tied to Leo and the lion, actually. And so a lot of times the lion is associated with waterways and fountains and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pole star. Actually, sometimes the pole star is referred to as the nail star or sky nail. So yeah, 100%.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm glad I put that up there. All right. Megan, you have anything? Or left?
No, I'm done with this one.
So now we'll move on to the Rider-Waite deck. Here we go.
Yeah, so this one, the secret esoteric name, like Mario said, is the Daughter of Firmament. It is an Aquarius card, and it's associated with the 11th house, Saturn, and Uranus. It is also a fixed air sign as well. So this card is like hopeful. It's like wish fulfillment, on like a surface level. But it's about finding the light within to get out of the darkness. It's like the light at the end of a tunnel. You've went through the tower, and now you've kind of made it back on track and where you're supposed to be. It's a symbol for unveiling, connection to the greater cosmos. I said before, integration of the spiritual body into the physical. It's the first of the last 3 stages of alchemy. So you have fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. So this card represents a spiritual attainment that is an essential stage in the alchemical process. It's the new self that is born after the Tower card. So it's like, being birthed out of the birth canal. The tower can represent like a birth canal, and you're coming out of that birth canal. And now, you come back reborn and changed and healed. It's a card of guidance, hope, and optimism, even grace. So this is like the end. This is like right for the end of the fermentation stage of alchemy, and then we're going to go into the distillation. And it's also the 17th card. So 1 + 7 is 8. And that harkens to the strength card. So these two cards are really related together. So this is like a revelation of light after a dark night of the soul. So we've all had those moments, especially on our spiritual path, where we could go down those dark places to kind of get us back to where we need to be. And just like, it's as above, so below, everything is necessary. You have to go through the dark to get to the light. You have to have both, or you don't know what the other one is. So this one is also a card of harmony, spirituality, love, peace, and it conquers failed relationships. We have victory and achievement through personal trials. This card is about harmonizing polarities. And then we have on the top there, so we have the 8 stars, the biggest one in the middle. So these ones in this deck are 8 pointed stars. And that big one in the middle represents source. And then it falls out to the rest of the cards and kind of becomes part of the unity consciousness or Christ consciousness. So it also represents life power, energizing the principles of the entire universe. It's the quintessence of the universe, or the great central sun. And then, so some of the things that you find in the card, the tree, that represents the quabalistic tree of life, or the brain and the spine, uniting for Kundalini awakening. You have the red bird, and the red bird in the card is the ancient Egyptian symbol for the soul. And then you have the mountain, and it represents the mountain of self, or inner attainment, or liberation. And then the water represents how we use our consciousness when we bring it from the ether down to the physical realm. And then the stars, the 7 stars on the side, represent these 7 original planets, and it's the 8th and brightest star is source, so it can also represent your chakras as well. So there is like quite a bit going on in this card. And then is also associated with Ibis or Thoth, which is soul ascension, which also represents the last Sephiroth on the tree, which is Kether. So this card is also a complete embodiment of the goddess unveiled. It's associated highly with the High Priestess, the Empress, and the Strength card, and the goddess Isis. It also represents purified consciousness, or naked truth, true truth. And then she's got like 2 pictures of water, and it's joining the spirit realm with the physical realm, the higher mind with the lower mind. And the pool represents universal mind. So when we link all these together is when we have an enlightenment process that takes place. This card is also, for me, when I get this in readings as well, I will also associate it with the need for quiet meditation to kind of get your mind right, so that you can get in the right state of mind to develop your intuition. And it's also a card of revelation. It's about figuring things out, coming to the revelation that there's more to this realm than what we see. It's a card of cosmic connection to the universal mind, spreading knowledge to the world through the watery intuition, and it represents our inner consciousness. That's what I got for that one.
Beautiful. Yeah, you mentioned some really excellent stuff there. One of the things I'm reminded of is you said time for, quiet sort of contemplation or meditation or something like that. The pole star is associated with stillness because it's always there in the same spot. So it's eternally there. It's considered an imperishable star. And so that still point within, that's there's a correspondence with the pole star being that still point, and then also the still point within yourself, your sacred center, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing regarding ether and spirit, and then the highest Sephiroth, right, Kether, I always think it's interesting that ether is right there in the name, right, if you just remove the K. But I think that it's possible that there are many emanations of water that we aren't even aware of. And so obviously we have liquid water, we have vapor, right? We have solid water with ice. I wonder if ether spirit is actually the highest aspect of water. That's something I like to kind of talk about. To me, it makes a lot of sense, right? The water's above and the water's below. And so I think there's something to be said about all of that. So yeah, very good stuff. I love what you bring to the table.
Oh, thank you.
With this one, again, I'm going to play off it like I did with the last one. If this was, again, showing stuff with the eyeball, again, I would say that the one like pouring into the water is probably the water, and I would say the other one pouring onto the ground, maybe the vitreous humor, which has blood in it and gives life. And when you hit that back part of your eyeball, you will also start to get the cones and rods, and we have green cones, and they look like cut grass. Basically, if you were to go look them up, they look like little blades of grass. And then back farther into your eye, you would get those types of, like the UN symbol or those wreaths. you would have those nerves that are hanging down from your optic nerve going back up, hangs down and looks very much just like an upside down version of that. But I'm wondering, like, again, if you're going along with her being the hyaloid and the separation of both waters, I could see how, like, maybe going into the vitreous, now you're getting life, you're getting a bird, it could even be rising or just, blood, the trees, that other stuff in your the vitreous, like those nerves and stuff. And then what I wanted to even say too, you mentioned ISIS, and I do think that is a really good thing. I agree with that as well, and attributing that to what I was saying before with the hyaloid and I think the cat and the snake. If you had both eyeballs and you were able to go like that, like a plunger, and change your hyaloid, you would get straight hyaloid, bent hyaloid, straight hyaloid, bent hyaloid. You get ISIS because it makes an S. So each eyeball being able to go straight and pull back would make an I and an S, an I and an S. You'd get ISIS, technically that way.
Right. Some people are making some comments in the comments about the number 7 and the Pleiades and stuff, and so
actually.
Yeah, and so I just want to unpack this briefly for people from my perspective, right? But someone mentioned 7 stars reminds me of the 7 daughters of Eve theory, that everyone originated from one of these daughters when mapping their mitochondrial DNA. That's really interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard of the 7 daughters of Eve theory, but there is so much Eve symbolism related to the North as well. And that the Garden of Eden, this paradise or utopia, has a northern correspondence. And so people can look into that. And that's why there's always this central tree, because it's the world tree, right? Oftentimes, right, if you look at Garden of Eden paintings and whatever, Adam and Eve, tree, serpent. This serpent, to me, in my opinion, according to my research, it really goes back to Draco, which is the only constellation that exists between Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And so Draco is perpetually revolving around the pole star, which means that it's perpetually revolving around the central axis that connects the heavens and Earth together. And so when I see a serpent around something that's phallic, I think of northern symbolism personally. And then also, so her daughters, Eve, right, or even Mary, there's a correspondence with that, I would say, that the 7 stars of Ursa Major have been looked at as 7 of her children, basically. So just wanted to throw that out there. Also, regarding the Pleiades, the amount of symbolism that is related, that overlaps between the Ursa constellations and the Pleiades is absolutely mind-blowing. It's crazy because people essentially say the same thing. This is where we come from, this is where we return to, etc. There are people who have more of a northern polar perspective who have put out there, and I feel like as though this is where I'm kind of at too. A lot of the myths associated with the northern sky, in the polar tradition, during the solar tradition or the solar era, during heliocentrism, a lot of those myths were actually transferred over to the Pleiades and the 7 sisters. And so that's just something I want to put out there. It's something you can unpack and look into. It's a very nuanced sort of thing, but maybe one day I'll give a presentation about it, because it's definitely worth a little bit of a dive, I would say. So just wanted to put those little factoids out there for anyone who's interested.
Thank you. Anything else you got over there, Megan or Mario? All right.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Then I got this one that I found. I was like, I got to show this one.
Oh, that's cool.
Only because I actually like I like a lot of his stuff, not all of it, but I do like some David Bowie. So I was like,
no, well, he embodies the archetype.
Yeah,
he does.
Yeah. Oh man,
his video Black Star. Have you guys seen that?
Amazing, yeah. Oh, that song is amazing. I think
that we could do a whole episode on that one.
Hell yeah, I totally agree. And here we got the moon.
Right. So we're at the moon card. Nice. All right. So the moon card, very interesting. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's like nobody questions what moon this is or what sun we're referring to in the sun card. The moon, obviously, very, very interesting. So many different things to say about the moon. There are so many myths about the moon being fake or inorganic somehow not natural. I've made videos about this. And I don't, I'm a Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. And so I have a reverence for the moon. I think the moon is fascinating. But I'll say that even throughout my years of doing research on the moon, I still have a lot of questions about the moon. The moon is very, very mysterious. There's so many anomalies connected to the moon, it'll actually make your head spin. I have a book just on lunar anomalies. What doesn't make sense about the moon, basically. And so I think that kind of is alluded to in some of these cards, right? I mean, you're not even really seeing a clear sort of image of the moon here either. You're getting kind of hints of the moon. Is the moon the crescent portion above that's yellow? Is the moon the spherical circular sort of thing right below that? If it is, none of them are showing the craters of the moon or the texture of the moon or are even colored like the moon, right? So what's going on here with the moon? I mean, I can't even say that I have the answer for that. All I know is that the moon for a long time has been looked at as actually being a stepping stone to get to other places in the cosmos. So the moon is kind of looked at as a gateway to go to other places, to go to other planets, if you will. And so some people have said that if you're going to astral project or astral travel, you want to build a relationship with the moon first, and you want to use the moon as that first opening or that first gateway. And what do you know? That's what you see here in this card. You see a gateway. You have these two towers. There we're talking about tower symbolism once again, very phallic in nature. You have two figures that look like Anubis on either side, guardians of the underworld, right? And the fascinating thing to me is that they're actually holding what looks like two glyphs of Mercury. Mercury is a psychopomp. So he's a guide or conductor of souls. So he takes people to other realms because he's the messenger of the gods. And so Mercury, the Egyptian correspondence for Mercury would be Thoth, right? And he's also a lunar deity, right? Even the glyph of Mercury, he has those horns, which horn symbolism, especially when it's like a little icon or a sigil or something, I think you can argue that the horns that you see on Taurus, as an example, relate back to the moon, right? The horns that you see on the Mercury glyph relate back to the moon. And so Mercury goes from plane to plane. He's able to transcend or go through these gateways. He understands the nature of the underworld. He also understands the nature of this place here. So he is who you want to be taken by if you're going to pass on, right? If you're going to go and transition out of here, basically. So everything here implies this transcendence in some way, shape, or form. The moon is always changing. That's one of the other mysterious things about the moon. It's constantly waxing and waning. And so the sun is always moving throughout the sky, but its power or radiance is generally the same, right? The same cannot be said about the moon. We are kind of like moon children. That's something I like to say, actually, because we're always going through changes as well. We're always constantly evolving, especially women, obviously. When they go through their cycles, right? People know that menstruation is related symbolically to the moon as well, right? And even sometimes you will see blood droplets on the moon card, depending on the deck, which is alluding to a number of things depending on how many droplets there are of blood. But the moon, too, something I like to talk about is the fact that a lot of words that start with M, vowel N, go back to the moon, because the moon for a long time was a measuring tool, the preeminent measuring tool. So even Islam and Judaism, their holy days are based on the cycles of the moon. It's not based on the cycles of the sun, which is why they change every single year, right? And even in Islam, their main symbol, which some people say that Islam's not even supposed to be associated with symbols, but their main symbol, if you're going to just draw anything that indicates Islam, it's going to be the crescent moon, and then it's going to have that 5-pointed star, which is very much related to Venus, in my opinion. And I've even heard astrologers, I'm going on like a million tangents now, but I've even heard astrologers talk about the fact that a lot of Venusian symbolism was at some point transferred over to the moon. And so there's this one astrologer, I believe her name is Ola Wolny, if I'm not mistaken. She's been on Aeon Byte before, but she makes the case that lunar worship, that there's something kind of sinister about lunar worship. And even people like David Icke, he likes to say that the moon and Saturn are in collaboration with each other, and that Saturn somehow sends signals to the moon. The moon amplifies those signals for Earth. It's a satellite. And somehow the moon is actually some sort of control mechanism or some sort of device that controls humanity. And so people have had all of these far out ideas about the moon. Potentially it being this malefic planet. There's a lot of sort of stories that are associated with the moon that implies that it turns us into something undesirable, right? Think about werewolves and stuff like that, right? The moon has the power to change. But what I was going to say regarding the letters, though, a lot of words that are M, vowel, N go back to the moon because of its timekeeping properties. So minute is a reference to the moon. Month is a reference to the moon. Monday is obviously Moon Day, right? Menstruation is a reference to the moon, right? And that cycle. And so I would say even men and man go back to the moon as well. And so what happens when a woman gets pregnant, right? She swells up, she gets nice and plump, and so she kind of has this like moon bump, right? So her belly gets big, and the moon is very much associated with things that are kind of mound-like, I think of even breasts holding milk, right? Or I think of, the sphere or the bubble. Very, very lunar in nature. I'll also say one of the biggest anomalies with the moon is the fact that we only see one side of the moon at all times. So what's up with that? That's pretty weird. That's pretty bizarre. The fact that there's only one face to the moon that we see here on Earth. So then therefore what's on the other side? What's going on there? The dark side of the moon. So that means that it has to be in perpetual motion as it revolves around in order for that one face to constantly be facing Earth. So there's all of that stuff. The moon corresponds, at least the card corresponds generally, most people say, with Pisces. Some people make the case that the moon should actually just correspond with the moon itself, that it should not be associated with the sign. But the fact that it is related to Pisces to me does make sense, because Pisces is the last sign of the year, and it kind of encapsulates all of the other signs before it. And it's very murky. It's related to illusions and dreams and things like that. Very much under the surface sort of stuff. Very, very subconscious sort of stuff, I would say. And I would say that the moon card definitely is related to all of those things. And even the Hebrew letter that's associated with it, Kaf or Kof, it means back of the head, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And so you never see the back of your head, right? And so it implies to me some sort of thing that's underneath your consciousness, something kind of shadowy or something kind of hidden. And the moon implies all of that stuff just by the nature of the fact that it comes out at night, right? So it's the nighttime sort of luminary that you're going to see. So it's associated with things that are hidden. It's associated with things that are kind of behind the veil, and things like that. And because it's so mysterious, I think humanity has put a lot of potentially, sinister things and have associated it with the moon because we don't understand its full picture, right? Yet it's seemingly, from an optical perspective, it's seemingly the closest thing to Earth. You can actually see the craters, right? You can actually see features on the moon. And so humanity has a very, very close relationship with the moon as well, because it is there, and you can actually see some of the details on the moon with your naked eye, even, right? Let alone with a telescope or whatever. Let's see here. So that's mostly what I have for now. I'm sure more things will come up, but what do you guys think?
I'll go and then I'll let Megan go. I think, with the moon, a lot, and I covered this in the Eyeball series. I do think the moon, pretty much, for me, is like the lens in your eye. And I do think, like you were even saying, kind of like even how the moon, like, waxes and wanes. It's almost like, in the lens in your eye can go out this way and then can revert back inside, going back up. So I could even see how, like, maybe flipping the light. But I do believe that the lens, believe it or not, is associated with the moon. And those sticks that they're holding right there, the Zanyals of Zin look a lot like this, in shaped like that. They kind of cross each other, and they're going from one part of the eye and connecting to the lens. They look just like what's at the top of them. And when they connect to your lens, they look just like the bottom, like a snake's tongue. That's exactly what it connects to. It sticks out and then grabs it like that. And that's when it starts changing everything. Really, that's what actually raises and changes all that shit in your eye, is those little sticks. I even do believe that that's quite possibly the River of Styx, because the aqueous humor is still down there. That's before you've entered the area with the blood. And you have all these things that look like little sticks attaching to a lens with water around it. So that's, I mean, not to get too much into really the card. I'm just going on what I think and including those staffs. But to me, I do think from stuff that I've covered, the moon is the lens in your eyeball.
Right. One of the things that I'm just noticing, I know I've counted them before, but the 9 yuds right there in the middle, right? I've heard in other decks that they've substituted the 9 yods for 9 blood droplets, and that it's symbolic of the 9 cycles that are missed when a woman gets pregnant, which I thought was really interesting. So it's about cycles, right? The cycle of a child being born, of being created in the mother's womb, how long it takes for that to occur. And then also that beetle down below. I don't know if that's technically a scarab beetle, but the beetle is generally associated with cancer as well. So my understanding is that cancer way back when in ancient Egypt, it wasn't looked at as being a crab. It was looked at as being a beetle. So to me, obviously cancer is ruled by the moon. So to me, the correspondence does make sense. And it does look like there is definitely this play between solar and lunar with what's happening above and what's happening below. And so the idea of a beetle, a dung beetle at least, the idea is that they roll a ball of dung and then they bring it into their quarters underground is my understanding. And so symbolically, some people have looked at that as the sun going underground, and this was an old school belief, is that the sun goes underground at night. It passes through the underworld, and then at night the moon comes out. And so different cultures have had their different beliefs about what happens to the sun and what happens to the moon at night. And a lot of times they just believed it went to the underworld, or that they're constantly fighting. It's a battle between day and night perpetually. And that's why one goes down and then hangs out for however many hours, and then the other one comes back up. And it's just this continual sort of loop, I guess, but definitely looks like a sun down there.
So you talked about the 9 yods on there. So in numerology, 9 represents the ending of cycles right before the beginning of new, because 10 would be 1, so it represents new. So 9 is the end of a cycle. And then of course with I wanted to touch a little bit on the menstruation. So like there's cycles within cycles in it, really. So every 3 months I'll change the moon phase that I start on, and then it'll come 3 days sooner or later than the month before. So with women, I don't know how many women are watching right now, but if you would notice that pattern, there is patterns within patterns when you're having your cycle, and the moon is all about cycles. So, and then those lines, I don't know why, like it keeps reminding me of like an EKG, and then the red and the blue colors is reminding me of something that I can't quite put my finger on. But do we know what those two figures there are in the middle? They're obviously Egyptian, but are they actual figures, like people that we know? Or are they just...
I mean,
I believe that they're just supposed to be a reference to Anubis, would be my guess.
That's what I assumed, yeah.
And then there's two black dogs down below, right? And so dogs are usually associated with the underworld. They dig for bones. They also very much associated with mercurial figures. And so Hecate, I was in a stream the other day, and Hecate came up, I think, and she's associated with dogs. And then Mercury has been associated with dogs too, and there's a version Hermanubis. It's like the combination of Hermes and Anubis, and so there's a lot of overlap there. So especially it being a black dog too, very much an underworld sort of thing. So yeah, the guardian of the gateway.
Yeah, and you did mention before it even means the back of your head. Technically, if you were to go off what I was saying with the lens going back in, you're going towards the back of your head now. Also, you're not looking out this way, you're going with the light up that way.
I see.
Yeah. All right, do you want me to move on to the next one?
Yeah, please.
All right. Here we go. The last one for this episode.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead, Mario? Or do you want to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the secret esoteric name for this one is the ruler of flux and reflux. The moon is mutable water. It's associated with Pisces, and Pisces in the zodiac is the most psychic of all the zodiac signs. Some key phrases here: consciously participating in your own evolution. It rules the subconscious activities, can create illusions. It's low light as opposed to high light with, the sun coming in. So it kind of, when this comes up in a reading for me, it's like there's some things that haven't quite come to the surface yet, things that might be hidden from view. It represents inner development, subconscious shadows that need to be cleared. It is the 18th card. 1 + 8 = 9, the ending of cycles. And so the big moon in the middle there represents the evolutionary process or the inner organization. And then the face profile there, it represents the moon as being a conscious being in of itself. The crawfish there represents organic life coming forward. It represents the early stages of consciousness and instinctive energy and physical evolution. And then the dogs are they represent a more evolved spiritual evolution. They represent the wild nature. So it is said that one of them is like a domestic dog and one of them is an actual wolf. And so that's kind of represents like taming your wild side, kind of getting control of that aspect of yourself. The path there represents the principles of vibration and rhythm, which is one of the Hermetic principles, and it represents the middle way. The pillars represent boundaries to what is known and what is unknown. And the pool, we see this pool in other cards like the Temperance and the Star card, which represents a deep mind exploration. It's also associated with the High Priestess, Diana and Luna. The ninth Sephiro is a foundation in the seat of the subconscious. So some keywords for this card are passage, choice, truth, dreams and fantasies, twilight, intuition, and imagination. So that's what I got for that one there. We've got quite a bit going on in this card as well. Not as much as the Star, but we got quite a bit going on in this one.
Excellent. Yeah, no, absolutely. For sure. So one of the things I wanted to mention regarding this gateway business with the moon or whatever, it's also, that means that if you were to take the moon and this was the first gateway out, that means it's also the last gateway back in, right? And so it's the final step back towards Earth. And this just reminds me, I have to mention it, but I feel like I mention this all the time, but the Babylonians had this understanding of the gateway of man and the gateway of the gods. Gateway of man is Cancer, the moon, and the gateway of the gods is Saturn. represented by a Capricorn, Capricorn being ruled by Saturn. And so there is this sort of old understanding that the moon is the first step out and Saturn is the end of the line. And so Saturn was the end of the line under the traditional sort of system. And I think it's fascinating that in 2001 A Space Odyssey, that they're supposed to go to Saturn. And actually for the film, they changed it to Jupiter. And so this would have completed, if they had gone to Saturn, this would have completed sort of the trajectory of moon first, going out until you hit Saturn. And then, of course, because they are Earthlings, they would have to return back to Earth if that's the case. So anyways, so kind of in a way, this is symbolically saying, too, this is the first gateway out. That's what that path represents, right? But the end of the line would actually be Saturn, which is interesting, too, because the final card, the world card or universe card, corresponds with Saturn. It's ruled by Saturn. So there is this interesting sort of path from moon to Saturn, if you want to break it down that way. And I think Slick had just mentioned something about Anubis or those dogs having some sort of correspondence with Saturn as well, which I can totally understand and see. But yeah, fascinating card.
Yes. So I was looking for Slick's comment. It must be too high up.
Oh, no, you're all good.
I really don't. I mean, you're done, Megan? Because I really don't have anything to add to this one. I was just going to show actually just 3 pictures of what I was trying to talk about before. If you both don't mind.
I have one last thing to say.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
So when you look at the Marseille version of this card, you're going to see droplets instead of little yodes. You're going to see droplets actually going towards the moon. And so that's something that I've always kind of tripped out about. I'm like, why do the droplets look like they're leaving Earth and going towards the moon? It could be this ascension thing. It could be this step-by-step sort of thing, going to the moon first, etc. The other thing, though, that's interesting is there are a number of cultures that have believed that the moon actually collects the souls of man upon death as well, and that the moon is kind of like a soul eater or something along these lines, right? It recycles the souls of man or whatever. And so to me, when I see those yodes going towards the moon, I do think it's kind of an interesting sort of thing of like, what is actually being implied here? And then I counted these too, and there's 15, which to me is kind of, I'm at a loss on what that might mean exactly, but maybe someone in the comments knows. 15 little
I've seen
yodes.
that come up a lot, and I'm really like, there's got to be something with the 15, because I've seen it like a lot on people's jerseys and things in movies. Very weird, very weird. I mean, look, like, not to get off like too much topic, but like that chick in soccer that's got that big mouth and going on about stupid shit and that colored hair, she's got 15 jersey. You know, and she's causing a whole lot of chaos and silly shit.
Right.
You know, it's definitely some confusion with that one. But are you done? You good?
Yeah, I'm solid.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good too.
All right. I was just going to show, like, before what I was trying to say, like, even about the moon and the lens and the zonules of Zin. I mean, this is like the zonules that attach to the lens inside your eye. I mean, kind of starts to look like a moon that's, like, changing in a sense.
Definitely does.
I mean, to me, it even looks like the South Park kids. But and then this is the things that the zonules of Zin, they come out like little Ys. And they attach to your lens. And that's what makes it move.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's at the end of the staffs, and it does look like a snake's tongue, so who knows?
Right on.
Yes.
Awesome.
There we go. That is the end of another tarot episode. And obviously, with 3 cards left, I can safely say the next episode will be the last one. And hopefully we'll get that probably done within another 2 or 3 weeks as well, as long as everybody's schedule works. Thank you both very much. Again, like, I know I've been saying this like every show, but like, this really has been a great series. And I think between all 3 of us, it's really a good discussion. And I'm really happy.
I've had a blast. I absolutely love doing this. So
This is actually something I'll go back and rewatch just so I can listen to you two. You know what I'm saying? It's not just me to learn. You know what I'm saying?
Nice.
Yeah. So thank you both very much. And thank you everybody in the chat. You know, I had a lot of people in there. Oh, real quick, I'm just going to toss this up, and then you guys can read that. Yeah, I want to thank everybody who jumped in. The usual people. Thank you, Slick. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lazarus. Everybody else, Gonzo. People who were saying what's up. That's what's up. That's why I go live. It's nice to try to interact with all of you. Thank you for the great comments. I threw some of those up on the screen, which I'll start doing more often when I go live. And now I'll let the two amazing guests, just in case people don't know. Megan, plug your show again one more time before we get going.
Yeah, so I'm a practicing occultist. You're good. I know what you meant.
Because you're gonna have
practicing
one.
occultist, yes. Intuitive tarot reader. I'm a teacher. I teach a lot of classes. I do intuitive tarot readings, and I can do anything that I do in person. I can do online. So if you guys are interested in booking anything with me, just let me know. On Instagram, that's my main social media page that I use. 7 Degrees of Wisdom. And then I'm also on Facebook as Megan Allen, and then 7 Degrees of Wisdom spelled out. I'm going to be coming out with my own YouTube channel at some point pretty soon, so you guys can look forward to that. I'll definitely put that stuff on all my social media so that you guys can see what's going on. Again, had a blast. Love hanging out with these two guys. I'm excited to do the next one.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Megan. And can't wait for you to get that started. And I wish you a lot of luck with that. I'm sure you'll do great.
Thank you.
And Mario, let everybody know about your stuff, please.
Likewise. For sure. Yeah, this is always fun. Looking forward to the next one. And if people want more information about symbolicstudies.com, I generally post information about each sign as we pass through them. So right now I've reposted an MPO. So if people are interested in following the signs, definitely check out, I would say my Instagram, symbolic.studies. Give my YouTube a go as well. I got a bunch of presentations and stuff on there on the live tab. But many thanks, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was a great ride so far. Yeah, so that is
agreed.
That is the end of Tarot episode 6. Again, thank you all in the chat and everybody showing up for the live. That's what's up. And thank you to these amazing guests again. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.